get into our first scheduled matter, which is item number 12, which is to receive an update on issues related to homelessness in Monterey County. And I know we're going to have a very interesting presentation, so I will immediately turn it over to Mr. Nick Chulos.
Thank you, Madam Chair and board members. Good afternoon. Yes, we have several items to go over with you this afternoon to give you an update on homelessness in Monterey County from a couple of different perspectives. We have two presenters that are going to be with us today. The first is Mr. Cody Ziegler, who is with the California Interagency Council on Homelessness. He's the Director of Statewide Policy, and we're very, very fortunate to have him join us. We had a last-minute change in plan. Ms. Julie Lowe, unfortunately, had a death in her family. She's the Executive Director of the Council, and she was unable to attend. And I'm so glad that Mr. Ziegler is able to join us this afternoon to talk about funding opportunities for local jurisdictions in dealing with homelessness. We've heard a lot about that in terms of the governor's budget, and we're going to hear more detail today from Mr. Ziegler. We also have Roxanne Wilson with us today, who, as you know, is the Executive Officer of the Coalition of Homeless Service Providers. Roxanne's going to give us an update on the implementation of the 5-year plan to reduce homelessness in Monterey and San Benito counties, which was previously adopted by your board several months ago. And then we're going to talk to you briefly about planning activities for the multi-agency summit on homeless issues that we're planning for the middle of July of this coming year. And just as an aside, we notified via the city managers all of the cities about today's meeting so that they could tune in if they chose, because the funding opportunities are, of course, important to the county, but they're also important to the cities, and we want to make sure that they're able to listen in. And then just last, as kind of an aside, we closed the recruitment on the Director of Homeless Services position that you approved recently, and we're in the process of having those applications screened by an outside panel of screeners. I understand we had a good response to the recruitment, and we're looking forward to interviewing and hopefully selecting that individual soon. So with that introduction, Madam Chair, I'd like to turn it over to Cody Ziegler from the Council on the Interagency Council on Homelessness to talk to us about funding opportunities available on addressing the homeless issue. So if I could ask the clerk to make sure he's admitted. And thank you, Madam Chair.
Welcome, Mr. Ziegler. Thank you for giving some time to us. We appreciate very much your helpful information. And we are not hearing you. A little better, but not much.
Madam Chair, if I might, Valerie, for some reason I'm hearing him over here on this computer. I'm not sure if that's...
I don't think it has anything to do with that computer.
No, still not hearing you. We can see your lips moving and hear you, but it's as if you were on like virtual zeros. Sounds like that's going to be...
Adams, we are hearing him on Zoom loud and clear, so I'm not sure if it's an audio issue inside chambers.
Does anybody, am I the only one who's not hearing this? No.
We're not hearing him on the speakers in the chambers.
Okay.
Madam Chair, maybe because there's a video forthcoming on his PowerPoint presentation that maybe I'll switch the audio from the computer.
Now, is that on Cody's side, or is that something we need to do?
If you disable the PowerPoint with the YouTube video, that may assist with his audio.
Eric.
I believe he has he's going to, Cody, you're showing a presentation, right?
I am not. I was going to. Oh, great, perfect. Hi.
Let's start all over again. Nice to see you.
Yes, thank you. Glad we can all hear. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. So let me just pull up my notes back up here. So yeah, hello, members of the board. Thank you all for having me today. So as mentioned, I'm Cody Ziegler. I'm the Director of Statewide Policy here at the California Interagency Council on Homelessness. And as mentioned, I'm standing in for Julie, who definitely regrets not being able to be here today, but I'm really glad that I was able to put some time into this conversation. And by way of background on myself, I've worked in the past in both Alameda and San Francisco counties on homelessness projects there as well. And today, just really wanted to give some introduction to CAL-ICH, an overview of the grants that we administer, and then really just show you our strategic spending guide that we put together, which is where you can find a lot of detailed information on the state and federal funding available for homelessness services. So just for a quick introduction of the California Interagency Council on Homelessness, we were created in 2017 as formerly known as the Homeless Coordinating and Financing Council. So if you see that name, it's one and the same, just had a name change. And so we were created to oversee the implementation of housing first policies, guidelines and regulations to reduce homelessness in California. In 2021, Governor Newsom signed a law which renamed and restructured our council to continue our momentum towards the state's broader vision for greater statewide leadership and coordination around our response to the homelessness crisis. So our mission is really to develop policies and identify resources, benefits, and services to prevent and work towards ending homelessness in California. And we do this through a few means. The first is grant making, which we'll dive into in a bit. But we also do a lot of state-level coordination of homelessness policy. We do this through our action plan for preventing homelessness, as well as 5 interagency working groups that we're putting together. We collect and analyze statewide data through the homeless data integration system and produce research on homelessness in the city. And we work to identify and lift up best practices from local communities across the state. So this is, a high level about what CAL-ICH does among other work. So just for some background information. And I will go ahead and share my screen, because now I'd like to go through some of the funding opportunities that we have available at CAL-ICH around homelessness services. So let me try to do that. Can you see this? Should say Homelessness Housing Assistance and Prevention Program.
Yes, we can see it, thank you.
Great, wonderful. So I'm going to go through the grants that CAL-ICH administers. As we'll talk about this, is that there are just a couple in the landscape of funding available at the state level. But I'll give some information about how they can find out more information about other grants that are available. But that's not necessarily my area of expertise, so I just wanted to focus on what we have available here today. So we'll start with the HAP program, which we heard about, Homeless Housing Assistance and Prevention Program. This is $1 billion annually over the next 2 fiscal years allocated to continuing care, counties, large cities, and tribal organizations. And the funding is intended to be flexible with a broad range of potential uses, as you can see on the screen here, with a focus on permanent housing. And the funding, so we're in round 3 of the HAP program. And the funding for this round is tied to meeting 7 performance goals that are established by each jurisdiction based on HUD system performance measures. And the notice of funding opportunity for this program was released in December, and applications are due on June 30th of this year. So that's our biggest grant program that we have. I'm happy to dive a little bit more into it later if there are questions, but that's sort of the biggest pool of flexible funding that we administer at CAL-ICH. Another funding program, I'll just scroll down here, and I'm showing you the guide that we will go through. So, another pool of funding that we have is the Encampment Resolution Funding Program. And so this was $50 million to provide housing and services solutions for people currently staying in encampment specifically. This also includes a focus on access to permanent housing. And the goal here is to identify scalable and replicable best practices for non-punitive, person-centered activities to address the housing and services needs of people experiencing homelessness and living in encampments. And really focusing on utilizing housing first approaches to address the needs of people in encampments here. So this grant program, the applications closed in December, and the notices of intent to award were not completed effectively. But there could be potentially more to come with this program in the future. And the last program that I'll just really quickly go through is the Family Homelessness Challenge Grants and Technical Assistance Program. So this program is open now, actually. is $40 million to provide competitive grants to technical assistance, competitive grants and technical assistance to local jurisdictions to promote rapid innovation, accelerate nascent programs, and expand upon promising practices to create scalable solutions that can be shared across the state to address and end family homelessness. So really geared towards families with minor dependents across the state. And the goal here is to really accelerate local jurisdiction rehousing efforts that can demonstrate sort of this cross-system collaboration and multi-funder initiatives and efforts that coordinate across funding streams and systems. So the request for applications for this was released on March 1st, so really recently, and applications are due April 5th. So sort of the common thread you can see across the CAO programs is coordination and collaboration across different parts of the homelessness services response system. So those are our three, this is really briefly about our three funding programs that we have going right now. I'll walk you through just quickly also our strategic spending guide, which is what I have up here. So if we just take a look, this is on our website. I'm happy to share a link to this as well. But we put this together because we know there is a lot of funding from a lot of different sources, both state and federal, relating to homelessness services. So we put together what we call the Putting the Funding Pieces Together guide, or for short, the Strategic Spending Guide. And really what the goal of this document is to provide information on all of the homeless services funding opportunities that we know of or knew of in November 2021. And our goal is to keep this updated and re-release this every 6 months to a year. So that's our hope, is to keep this updated to help with the coordination. And one thing that this document does well is that there's a lot of information here. So I covered, like 3 programs that CAO administers. And you can see them here: HAP, Encampment Resolution Funding Program, and Homelessness Challenge Grants. But there are so many more funding programs related to homelessness services. So what this document attempts to do is give sort of a high-level overview in this first part of what are the different funding programs and what are the prioritized services of those programs. So non-congregate shelter arrangement housing, rental assistance, permanent supportive and service-enriched housing, and diversion and homelessness prevention. So which of these programs, which funding can you use for which uses? So that's sort of the first part, and it goes through both state and federal programs here. The second part of the document is what we saw, really diving into each of these funding programs with a lot of detail, probably more than it's necessary to go through at this moment, but it's good for the policy folks on your team. And then the last part of this document is local investment plans. So we encourage people to use this really actively, this document. And so we have a sample here of how you could create a local investment plan based on the different funding opportunities that are in there. So this is just an example that we put together. Which funding streams can be used for which uses from the local level. So I will send out the link to this document as well, because I think it has a lot more information than I can provide in 10 minutes. But I'll wrap up here. Happy to open it up to any questions you might have for me, or go to the next speaker as well.
Thank you very much for presenting that. I'm glad you can provide a link, because for someone who has aging eyes, it was a little tiny and hard to read. But yes. I think that the information you provided was very important. So I look forward to having all of us receive that link, and I know you can provide it to Mr. Chulos, and we will be able to have it. Let me just see at this point if any of my colleagues have any questions, or if we'd like to move forward to the rest of our presentation. And seeing yes, Supervisor, we'd ask you, your hand is up.
Mr. Vicker, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate the work that the state is doing to put the money that's needed to address these issues into the hands of local government, so that we can be responsive to what is really a crisis that's being experienced across our state. I just have a couple questions. We collectively, I think, spend a lot of money moving people along without actually getting them into the permanent shelter that they need. And so some of the ways in which we find that people are unwilling to trust this, this is the first time that we've had these kind of resources available. And so this need to build trust with people that we're actually going to follow through on what we say when we say we're going to get you into shelter, and we're not just going to leave you then 2 weeks later without any of the things that you've been able to collect along the way. Can you speak at all to the state's resources? You talked about the Encampment Resolution Grant, but funds for things like safe parking programs or the state's perspective on encampment solutions as an interim step towards getting people into the system where we can actually provide meaningful services and housing?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you. So our Encampment Resolution Program is really aimed at lifting up sort of innovative strategies and solutions proposed by local jurisdictions that help address the services and needs of people living in encampments with a goal, right, and a focus on finding permanent housing solutions. And so we didn't dictate in that notice of funding opportunity, exactly what we wanted to see, because we know that local jurisdictions know their people best. And so we wanted to provide a chance for them to sort of propose what they thought, what solutions they thought would work best for them with the people, for the people living in encampments in their areas. And so those funds can be used flexibly in a lot of ways. I haven't personally looked through all the applications that have come in, but I know there's a variety of proposals within those to address the needs of people living inside.
Okay, great, thank you. And I think that I've seen some really innovative pieces come up there, and we oftentimes hear, oh, we can't use state money for safe parking or for these programs, but I think that what you're saying is that there really is more flexibility being made available, and it's worth pursuing potentially and trying to understand what might be available or how we could fit into what's happening or what the resources. The other question that I have is, and we're in Monterey County, we have 12 incorporated cities plus the county, and there's oftentimes this sort of assumption that and it's changing, granted, but historically there's been the assumption that it's really the county's responsibility because we have social services, that the county should be the lead on all things related to homeless services and funding for shelter or related services. Can you just speak a little bit to that challenge of how do we align, how do we bring everyone along? I think the county is interested in taking on that leadership role, at least speaking for the board, that as I know we've had discussions, but we can't do it without our city partners. And so just to that point, like who is responsible and how do we navigate those? Really, on so many of these issues, nobody is ultimately, from a mandated perspective, responsible. So it comes down to sort of a moral and ethical and financial who steps up.
Yeah, thank you. I think so from our perspective, and I think this is reflected in our HAP program, our homeless housing distance and prevention program. We really, really do encourage local coordination between counties, cities, continuing of care, and we have been encouraging folks to apply jointly, between cities and counties and like across jurisdictions for that funding. And so that's something that we really hope to see in this next round of funding, is that local coordination. And in the planning for those grants and the applications, right, there's local plans that are going to be created, and I think in that process as well, that's one way to facilitate getting on the same page locally. And so we hope that process sort of facilitates that local coordination.
Great, thank you. I'm sure there's many more things we could talk about, but I'll leave it at that for now. Thank you again for joining us today.
Yeah.
Thank you, Supervisor Radasky. Are there any other questions from our colleagues on the board? Anyone in the audience? Any questions for Mr. Ziegler? Yes, okay, we do.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Hi, Wes Whitesley, this Monterey County Homeless Union. Just actually curious, like, as we identify people in the HMIS cars, the guys with that, and trying to put them in housing, how are we creating that safety net for them? Because the safe parking is nice, but it's only 12 hours a day. So they need to be somewhere 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, especially if they're infirm, disabled. It makes it really difficult to keep on moving around. I'd like to see a immunity from sweeps, like a guarantee that if we sign you up for services, we're not just going to try to steal everything you got and make you move along. because people need to be somewhere. They need to get an address, and we should also sign up to register to vote, so that way they can have an address, and we have a way to find them, and they do feel like they have a sense of relationship in this community. And I think the way that they're treated, they'll treat their environment much better. It's just about redirecting some behavior. If you don't want to see a blanket of trash or whatever. I don't think those are difficult problems to solve. I think that we set people up for failure, and I guess I was just wondering your take on that and how we could do that across the state, because we have 25 chapters throughout the state, and they're all complaining this is about direct impact, and they're hurting. So how do we alleviate that hurt?
Thank you, Liz. Would you like to respond, Mr. Ziegler?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I have all the answers to that, unfortunately, but I appreciate the comment and the question. I think, from our Encampment resolution funding program, really I know I've said this, but the focus is really on identifying solutions that really meet the needs of people living outside and living in encampments. And so one of the reasons we weren't prescriptive necessarily exactly the solution that needed to happen is that we know you all have a more direct connection with the folks living outside of encampments. So we wanted to provide an opportunity to really tailor the solutions to those communities, with, again, obviously the focus on permanent housing, right? Because that's what we know is homelessness. But yeah, thank you for that comment.
Thank you for your comments as well. Okay, sending it back to Mr. Chulos.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And if Mr. Ziegler can stay on for the rest of the meeting, that would be great, or as long as he can. Very helpful. Now we'd like to turn to Roxanne Wilson to have Roxanne, as the Executive Officer of the Coalition of Homeless Services Providers, give us an update on status of implementation of the 5-year plan. And I believe she's on the line.
I am. Thank you so much, Nick. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm so glad to return. I do have some really great news about the work that's been happening since we've done the 5-year, since you've recently adopted the 5-year plan. The community has been moving. We have been really getting to work, and I just appreciate the County of Monterey's leadership in being the first to adopt a plan. I think that you started something, and we definitely have other jurisdictions lining up, and I'm excited to get to that part of this presentation. So I'm going to go ahead and just jump right in. I assume we could all see the screen.
Yes, we can.
Thank you so much. Uh-oh. Okay, so just a quick little reminder. Back in 2020, the coalition worked with a lot of our partners, our local partners, specifically Department of Social Services. Thank you, everyone from that team. Monterey Health Department, San Benito County Health and Human Services, and the City of Salinas. And we all agreed that we were going to rewrite the plan. Originally, there was a 10-year plan to end homelessness. And we had realized that we needed a more actionable plan, something that was focused on housing and aligned with best practices. So we brought a whole team together and moved forward, and we had released the plan in July 2021. As a quick reminder, there are 3 overarching strategies to reduce homelessness by 50% in 5 years. And those 3 overarching strategies was to increase the participation by local stakeholders, leaders, decision makers across the region. We also wanted to improve system performance, right? So we did a lot of analysis on how our homeless response system was performing, and we came up with objectives and thresholds on what we feel like is would be considered a performing system. And also, we wanted to expand services to people who are living outside. So just to go through how we've been addressing strategy area number 1, as I mentioned, the County of Monterey adopted the plan on November 16, 2021. The County of San Benito and the City of Salinas and the City of King have also moved forward with adopting the plan. I am currently on the calendar for the City of Pacific Grove, and the City of Seaside and I are in the process of working out a date as well. So as I mentioned, we're very excited. There's a lot of movement, and what I've learned is that people just didn't know exactly which way to turn, right? There is, we know that there's a homeless crisis, we know that there's a housing crisis. We had all these independent or siloed approaches, but what we love about the plan is it brought everybody together and it gave us one direction to focus on, and when we move together, we're way more effective. We also started creating these intentional collaboratives. So at the beginning of the plan, the coalition had pulled together what's called the Funders Committee. So this is exactly what it sounds like. It's all of the funders of Monterey and San Benito counties, and we get together to really strategize where our money is getting spent. Cody had mentioned the strategic, or the fund, I forgot what it's called, the local investment plan, excuse me. That is a part of the HHAP round 3 application. So these folks are definitely diving deep and really analyzing the amount of money that's coming into this community and making sure that it makes sense and it's in alignment with the 5-year plan. We also relaunched the Housing Pipeline Committee. This committee is scary because it's a whole different language that I don't really speak, but it is of city managers, city planners, developers, the housing authority. So they're all getting together and having this discussion of what's in the pipeline, what are some of the new laws or ordinances that's coming down, and how can we all work together to address some of these complications, right? The wonderful thing about the Housing Pipeline Committee is we have been able to move forward with what's called a fair market analysis. The supervisor Askew also had a lot of role in that. So thank you for that, Supervisor Askew. So the coalition, not the coalition, excuse me, the Housing Authority is going to be doing an analysis on our fair market rents. When we, and I assume we will, get this approved by HUD to increase our FMRs, that makes it more attractive for developers to develop housing in our community because the rent they'll get per unit will go up. This is for low-income housing and housing that is tied to vouchers mostly. So very excited about the work of the pipeline. And not too long ago, but it was before the 5-year plan, certainly worth mentioning, we did establish a Youth for Action Board. It is really composed of transition age youth who have experienced homelessness, and they are an official committee of the continuum of care. They are also an advisory committee to the coalition, so they are reviewing every single proposal that we get when it comes down to serving their population. We're very proud of them. They're certainly future leaders, and I'm excited for you guys to meet them in the future. We also learned that people just want to know the problem in its entirety, right? I think when we get piecemealed information over time, and it's really hard to make those connections. So, as mentioned, we'll be doing the Leafy Home Summit on Homelessness. At this very moment, it is scheduled for July 14th. I do ask that you guys, put a hold in your calendars. I'm in the process of contracting with the Steinbeck Center. We currently have a hold on the date and we're just getting through it. So we're very excited. The Lead Me Home Summit on Homelessness is really targeted to jurisdictions. So everybody can, again, get together, really understand what's going on so we can work in the same direction. We'll be talking about funding. We'll be talking about the new point in time count would have been released by then, so we'll review over time how has our homeless crisis changed. The coalition is in the process of doing a racial disparities analysis, and of course our coordinated entry process is being evaluated. All of these things should wrap in the summer of this year. Under the strategy area number 2 of improving system performance, really quickly, as a reminder, we took a snapshot of what our system looks like. And this slide should look familiar if you had been into any of these meetings about the 5-year plan. But we have our baseline, and what we found out is that people were not exiting the permanent housing at the rates in which we felt like were appropriate, I suppose. We understand where the problems lie in that. We also would like to see the length of stay inside of emergency shelters, transitional housing, and rapid rehousing significantly reduced. And we would like to see us serving people who are more literally homeless. There are many different categories of homelessness, but we really want to, the way you'll see impact is if we really have a focus on the people who are literally homeless, category 1. And also, during the 5-year plan analysis, we took a snapshot of our housing market. And as you probably could have guessed, we have a major shortfall of housing for this particular population. So over time, we really needed to ramp up construction because we can't improve system performance if people have nowhere to go. Taking all of that information in, we have been focusing on building a system that just makes sense. So the City of Salinas hired an outreach coordinator, and that outreach coordinator is in strong partnership and collaboration with the coalition. And they are just running, coordinating the outreach between the several outreach teams that we have currently in our community. We've also systematically paired rapid rehousing funds with emergency shelter funds. The coalition is working with the city and the county to also do an emergency shelter guidelines. We're standardizing housing first across the board. And also writing rapid rehousing policies, creating a landlord engagement strategic plan, and also the coalition, I'm very happy to report, is hiring a manager of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So we've been working very hard with the Housing Authority to increase the housing subsidy vouchers. As you guys are aware, there's 269 emergency housing vouchers that came into this community under the HUD's response during the pandemic. We've also been able to secure 65 foster youth for independence vouchers within the past 6 months, and also 65 HUD BASH vouchers. This is on top of, for HUD BASH, that's on top of the 199 that already existed in our community. So the Housing Authority has also been rocking and rolling and trying to increase the amount of the subsidies that we have in our community. But of course that's challenging, right? Because we certainly don't have almost 400 available units in Monterey County to receive these vouchers. So we have been working with the City of Salinas, the City of King to purchase units under Home Key. The City of Salinas has, the first round of Home Key was 101 PSH units at the Midnight Inn. They just were awarded a total of, I think, $29 million to purchase the Sanborn Inn and, I'm sorry, there was another one, but, the Salinas Inn on the PowerPoint. So, and then the City of King incredibly was able to secure a 46-unit permanent supportive housing project. And all of these projects will be accepting the vouchers that I mentioned in the previous screen. So again, it just goes back to making a system that makes sense and responds, we're really being intentional at identifying gaps and filling those gaps. And then for the last strategy area, which is expanding the service-oriented responses to people who are experiencing homelessness, the City of Salinas has significantly increased outreach services. Now, granted, a lot of that was under COVID, the COVID waves of funding that came down, and we're working very hard to try to identify other resources to keep these outreach teams funded. The truth of the matter is we can't do it without outreach. I was in the system when we only had, a few outreach teams, and it was very, very, very small teams, and they just were really stretched. So having the CHE team, who has been partnering with the county and the coalition, having Dorothy's Place and their outreach team, and also increasing Interim Inc. And the City of Salinas now has their own outreach team, and Community Human Services has a youth-specific outreach team. I mean, really, they're the ones that helped us during the point-in-time count. They're the ones who's responding when a cleanup is scheduled. they're really important to this community, and it's important to me to try to keep them funded as long as we can. We've also just done things that are fairly basic, but we never thought to do it before, right? So we've updated and translated all of our outreach materials. Our outreach teams are actually doing emergency housing voucher referrals straight from encampments. So another thing that has historically happened was that people had to go to the agency to get those types of services. But now you could get your ID, you could get your social security card and your birth certificates, you know, you could start those processes straight from an encampment. Meeting people where they are has been very successful for us during the pandemic. And again, we just are working very hard to try to figure out how to keep this thing going. Also to mention, as you guys know, but this is really for the crowd, the county had just released an RFP for outreach. So thank you again for you guys continuing to support the efforts of the Homeless Response Network. Cody brought up the Encampment Resolution Fund. So here's a list of all of the communities who received money, and the city of Salinas was one of those. So we are very grateful for the city for stepping forward and competing. There are some things that I really wanted to just bring up and lift up. So the original funding availability, I think Cody mentioned there was an increase, but it was $47 million. And of that $47 million, the city of Salinas was allocated $4 million, or almost 4.1. What we love about the city of Salinas' proposal is that even though they took lead, the Continuum and the county, because your water resource management team also joined, we were very strategic. We identified the areas that we wanted to focus on. It is along creeks. Those creeks, to my understanding, feed into the Monterey Bay, so that was a very high priority for us. We also was able to identify that about half of those folks were undocumented, so we brought in Catholic Charities. And then the intention is to coordinate actual housing for every single one of those 50-ish people that were living inside of that encampment. And we wanted to make sure that that was the priority, right? That they landed in housing first. And after they got into housing, then we would work to bring that area of the creek where they were housed from back to its original and natural state. The ERF, and I know I'm sitting on this slide for a minute, but I think it's important to note that the reason why the city, in my humble opinion, was successful at receiving that is because they actually had a place for people to go, right? The state was looking for that nexus. And because the city just received the home keys, this population will have, dibs at those units. And they have also put inside of their application money for the folks who don't qualify for home keys, usually because of their citizenship status. A lot of the home keys, as I mentioned, require vouchers, and a lot of folks who are undocumented, especially if they're by themselves, they won't be able to get one of those vouchers. So the city put housing subsidies for undocumented folks within their application. It was a $7 million project, and they were able to find $3 million worth of local match and leverage. So I feel like the component of immigration services, also the people that they had at the table made that application really strong. So we're very happy for the city of Salinas. There are other services, right? As I mentioned, the Department of Social Services just released an RFP for a safe parking program and also your nighttime outreach. The coalition continues to sponsor porta potties and sanitation stations throughout the county. We have raised a lot of money to keep those going. In the first 2 years, it cost us about $250,000 to keep those out. We still have some money to keep it going at least until the end of this year. So that's really important. People need to be able to wash their hands and use the restroom. So we have responded accordingly. And that actually concludes my presentation. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Roxanne. Thank you, Madam Chair. Are there questions of board members for Roxanne Wilson?
Supervisor Phillips.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation, and your organization and your people were key when we were trying to make some changes and had to do something down at the Powero River. So your services were invaluable. And, you know, we heard today about, you know, don't have the sweeps and don't do that. And I just feel that there are some people who, because of maybe some mental health issues or other issues, just aren't going to be willing to come in to a homeless shelter. Or they may not be able to come in because they can't follow the rules. But has there been any focus on outreach workers going out to the people in the field and providing the help and services so they can clean up their own area? The reason we have to have these cleanups is they've made such a mess, and people, our citizens just don't feel like they have to live with that. And most of the objection you have from your people isn't the fact that someone's on the side of the highway with a tent and their dog and some other things there. It's all the other things that accumulate. When I was working on a project that we had in Prunedale there, and when we went up, and the guy had 32 shopping baskets that he brought from Safeway up there and never returned them or anything. So my thing is, have we talked about, I know the city of Salinas has done a little bit of that, helping with the cleanup. Is that feasible, or is that something to say, look, we understand we're not sanctioning you to be here, but here's the resources, we'll help you clean it up, and we'll have maybe we put a bathroom out there for you to provide that service.
Thank you so much, Supervisor Phillips. I always appreciate your district. Your staff are incredible, and we have actually done that in your district. There was once a constituent who had made a complaint about a person who was living on one of the roundabouts, and the coalition worked with the CAO outreach team and Caltrans and community volunteers and the business district, right, or the businesses, who all donated supplies, and we brought in volunteers to clean out that area. Since then, the CAO outreach team visits that person at least once every couple of weeks to make sure that it does not continue, that it doesn't get as bad as it was. So long story short, yes, it's certainly a big, it's something that I think about all the time, is how can we take that and scale it out to make sure that all of the community can experience that same sort of community service, right? It's complicated, again, because the outreach team that's really willing to do something like that is the CAO outreach team, and they are, their funding is starting to sunset fairly quickly. So like I said, we're working really hard to try to find a way to keep them going. I think that they're a very strong partner. And I also feel like we should figure out how we can do a community trash cleanup. Is there any way we could work with, waste management to where there's no charges if the community is doing such cleanup? So that's on my to-do list. That's actually on year 2 action plan. We're in the process of pulling all of the information to draft year 2 action plan. It's one of my top things when it comes down to serving people who are living outside, because I agree. The number one reason why electeds feel the need to have to move forward with the cleanup is because it's the cleanup part. It's not the people part, it's the cleanup part. So if we can find a way to address the needs of both the housed and the unhoused, I think that that's the first step, is just trying to find a way for us to to live together and not impact each other too much. And I think the trash is the #1 reason. So stay tuned, Supervisor Phillips. I'll let you know once I come up with a plan.
Let me just say, I'm sure we could get Waste Management and the other ones to come behind us on that, and maybe we expand our service on Smith and Enright to expand a little bit more to help with that. But if we were able to keep the area cleaned up for the people, and they didn't see the unsightliness, I think my community would be much more willing to get in and work to help provide services and things. It's the reaction to the mess that they see, but if we're able to work on that issue, I think a lot of the resistance to the homelessness in our community would dissipate. But thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Phillips. And I'm trying to see whether or not my colleagues are going to put their hands up. Okay. And I think, Wendy, we're going to get that.
I just wanted to appreciate the work that you've done so far, Roxanne, with all the partners. I know getting that wind down in King City announced last week was big. And as we move forward, I want to join in on the comments of Supervisor Phillips. One of the driving forces for us in King City is the fires. We hear a lot about needing to protect the river. And we're not allowed to touch the river as it's private property through South County. Yet at the same time, we're watching a lot of the trees in the river get cut away for firewood. And so it's quite literally disappearing and making the issue more visible, and then the fires being started, they're escaping fire pits and nearly burning homes. So it's been a major challenge for us, and I think the win of getting a project in South County to help address the challenges we have there is one that should be lifted up as we see the need for additional projects throughout our county communities so that we can all take care of folks where they are. And so I just want to appreciate the work that you've done so far to keep the vision countywide. And thank you for your work, Roxanne.
Thank you, Supervisor Lopez. Supervisor Vest.
Thank you. Roxanne, this is great, and I just want to again shout out to South County, King City, Salinas, and even Pacific Grove for the work that they're trying to do to bring programs and shelter beds and additional housing beds and supportive housing beds into their community. I think it's a huge, huge leap from where we were just a few years ago to have everyone on board working in partnership towards solutions. So recognizing and thanking everyone for that. The board, the other thing I want to acknowledge and thank you for is committing to the date, which I don't have in front of me now, but for the homeless summit, which is something that this board with the city of Salinas gave direction to move forward with last year when we had a joint meeting. So I know it's been a lot of cats to herd and a lot of pieces to pull together, but I'm really excited to see that that's moving forward. I know that there's some costs associated with that summit, and that the Community Foundation has made a commitment to help support that, as has the Coalition of Homeless Services Providers. And I did just want to, as part of our discussion today, see if there was a need to have county commitments of dollars, or at least give authority to our CAO up to some amount, so that if and when that's needed to pull this off, that we can do it right. I do know that there are many of our city council members. I have 5 cities within my district who are interested in understanding these issues better, but just haven't had the information presented to them in a way that is actionable and that they can work with and bring suggested actions back to the council. So I think the summit is a really important action for us collectively to move forward. We want to make sure the county is prepared to support that. Let's see here. And I also, I think it's important, and I'm appreciating the conversation today, and I appreciate the way in which homeless individuals in a community impact the individuals who are in homes in that community. But I do think that it's important that we are thoughtful in how we talk about the crisis of homelessness. The crisis of homelessness isn't for me that I have to drive past a tent and see someone living outdoors. The crisis of homelessness is somebody is unable to have shelter that's safe and secure and affordable. And so as we talk about these things, I think that our words matter, and who we're centering in the discussion also matters. So just a point to be aware of and thoughtful of. So I'm sure there's more to talk about, but I'll pass it on to my colleagues to continue. But thank you for the presentation today, Roxanne, and for all the work that you're doing.
Thank you, Supervisor. Supervisor Level, your hand's up.
Thank you, and I love having this conversation because we have made a lot of progress, and I want to thank Roxanne for being a great leader along with our other partners, Dan Baldwin, among many others who have really helped us elevate the conversation in a compassionate and dignified way, and I think we've taken a good approach. Also understanding that our community does have concerns about the unsightliness of some of the encampments, and we try to approach it with balance. Also knowing that those will also present public health hazards for the residents and for the community at large. But all local governments, we're having staffing shortages, and I thought, Roxanne, if you could just explain a little bit about your challenges. I mean, all employers are having a hard time recruiting and staff, and to do this work, you really need the right people who have the right training skills, the right patience. The heart has to be in the right place. But I think that often doesn't get discussed, that as we have a lot of expectation and as new resources are coming to local governments and to the extension to our nonprofit partners, maybe you could just elaborate a little about what are your challenges to continue to elevate this work and to keep and recruit and retain staff.
Thank you, Supervisor Leo. I do want to take a moment to thank you for your leadership, being the chair of the Leadership Council for the many years that you have served, and I think that we have been a great partners in this work, so thank you for everything that you do for us. But yeah, challenge indeed. The coalition, actually, one of my key staff members was recruited by the state of California's Cal ICH, so Cody, if you're there, say hello to Molly. So, you know, it's hard work. So the thing about the coalition is we have to understand everybody's perspective, and that's the way we'll be successful. And a lot of times, folks who enter into this work, they're really like from a perspective of doing social work, and we're here for the client, and we're here for the clients certainly. But we have to, the way that, as I mentioned, the way that we'll be successful is really listening to all of the stakeholders and trying to find that middle ground. And oftentimes that middle ground is really, really small. But if we find it, we'll be able to have some progress. The coalition has had to expand significantly. And through that expansion, we had several seats. We were operating with about 25% of our chairs MD during this whole presentation, all the time that it took to get all of that stuff done. I have been doing a lot of the work even myself. We had to hire data analytics team because we wanted to make sure that we were informing our decisions using real local data. And we wouldn't be able to do that without having folks to actually do that. And then, as I mentioned, we had to hire a person who's really focused on equity, because sometimes we just move so quickly that we don't really realize that some populations may get left behind, right? So having a person in-house to pay attention to the fact that, or to pay attention to if we're being equitable in the decisions that we make is really, really important. During the distribution of vaccinations, when we were trying to get those out to people who are experiencing homelessness, the equity team was really the driving force to make sure that we didn't forget about smaller jurisdictions, especially in South County. There, historically, that South County has been underserved, and having an equity team to make sure that doesn't happen in the future.
Thank you so much for your response.
Madam Chairman, I'm not done yet. I do want to just also express support for the Homelessness Summit. Those are not only important to get people on the same page, hopefully on policy, and get elected leaders to understand what the plan is, but I think it's part of a larger effort to create those homelessness champions, that as we elevate the discussion and we get more people involved in the conversation, hopefully it does create that political will for elected leaders all across Monterey County to be willing to be a little bit more courageous, knowing that we have examples where we've done good projects and we've done them right, we managed them right, And I also want to take an opportunity to extend my thanks to King City and Mayor LeVar and their city manager there, because we weren't there 3 or 4 years ago, and here we are. They've got that $13-14 million grant from the state to have their first major project take place in King City, and that's progress. And I want our community to understand it doesn't happen overnight. It's very intentional. We have to support each other as elected officials, support each other in communities. I know our leadership council gave some money towards that project, so did the Department of Social Services, and Monterey County supported the King City project. But these are all examples of us supporting each other in our efforts, and then we're making progress as a whole and county-wide. So I want to make sure that we support Roxanne and making sure we get our first homelessness summit off the ground that is successful, because it does have a ripple effect in other ways as well. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Supervisor. Just a few comments on my own before we draw this to a conclusion. There are several things that I worry about in this regard. And Roxanne, I just so empathize with you as far as finding staff. Coming from a full-time career in the not-for-profit sector, I know as well that salaries are never at the prime for nonprofit workers. And that adds another dimension to the difficulty of finding and retaining staff. So I just applaud you, because I know that the people that you are able to recruit are the ones that are simply called to the field. And that's not everybody, but those who do are just really wonderful people and giving them a lot. I thank you again for all of the efforts that you've made, both on the Homeless Summit as well as the other work that you've been doing. And I'm very appreciative of the work that the city of Salinas and the county have done, but I must admit that I'm really hoping that we're going to be able to expand those partnerships within the Monterey Peninsula. I think there are a lot of things that are happening, especially along the encampment problems, that we have not been able to generate enthusiasm about as far as helping us. An example is there was a fire at the homeless encampment down on the Carmel River near the Rio Road area, the Voucher Valley. And, you know, it's causing problems with the people who live there, who are now having some issues getting their insurance renewed, because they view it as an absolute just a problem that exists when you have people who are having illegal campfires, etc., right behind your housing development. So that's one of the things that we've been concerned about, and I'm hopeful that we might be able to take a look at beyond Salinas and beyond South County, to look over at North County and to look at the Monterey Peninsula as well. The other area that I'm worried about, it's one step up from homelessness, but I'm very fearful about people falling back into homelessness as we emerge from the pandemic. And so many of the social programs that we have that have been able to keep people in their homes during this difficult time, when those programs start to phase out, I'm concerned that we're going to see more people losing their housing due to rent increases and evictions. So my hope is that we're going to be able to do everything that we can to keep people housed and to increase truly affordable housing opportunities. That means that we're going to need to be creative and flexible in how we build housing in our county. It means moving away from the traditional development models that don't yield the kind of housing that would be affordable to the people who need it the most. And I don't know if Cody is still on the line, but it looks like he is. Every time I have an opportunity to speak to anybody who is any place within the governor, I just always want to please encourage conversation between the housing and community development people and the Department of Water Resources. Because we cannot build housing, affordable or otherwise, if we do not have water. And there is an issue within the Department of Water Resources that makes it very difficult for people in Monterey County to be able to do that. So again, I just thank you so much for the work that you're doing. I think this is very thrilling and exciting, and I believe that we're moving forward now to having the public summit take place. And I believe that we are receiving the update, and I am not clear where we stand on next steps, but I will go back to Nick.
Madam Chair, thank you. Yes, and we appreciate Cody and Roxanne for their presentations this afternoon. And Roxanne is in the thick of planning the summit, as you well know. We've got some partners there. The Monterey Bay Economic Partnership is involved. The Community Foundation is involved. Obviously, Roxanne's coordinating it. Our board offices are involved. County departments are involved. The summit's going to be really important that we get as much agency involvement from, as you said, Madam Chair, throughout the county, the various cities, and that's really going to be one of our goals, as well as the providers. And they have to be a really intensive, solution-oriented day where we can walk away from that summit with some real tangible action steps. There may well be some costs. I know that the Community Foundation, and I believe the MDEP have contributed some money. What we'd like to do is come back when we have a better fix on what those costs might be for an allocation of funding. We may also want to assist in some other areas, such as the outreach team issue, and we'll take a look at that and bring that back to the board. We'd like to know if the board has any direction or any feedback you'd like to give us about the summit, other than what you've already given us, which was really helpful.
I think that we have covered things. It looks like Mr. McKee would like to say a couple of words, so I'll let him do that before we close the item.
No, just in general, as Nick was talking about direction, each board member might make comments, and some, that's not necessarily direction from the board, so if there's any specific direction you want to give, that would be appropriate in the form of a motion.
Yes, Supervisor Askew?
Yeah, thank you. So I think that as far as direction, I think that the things that I understand we're talking about this summit would be a hybrid event that allows for some of our elected officials to not have to travel as far. So there are some costs associated with that, having something in person and online. I think that having the partnerships that we've, I've seen it, I'm not sure if there's a draft agenda that's been circulated, but the conversations that I've had all seem to be lined up with what makes sense in the conversations that we've had here today. I would like to, I think, in terms of direction, give sort of a number of up to $15,000. So when you return, tell us where to find those dollars. But I'm comfortable contributing with county funds up to that amount to support the funds that have been contributed elsewhere, and to allow us to, I think, go out and solicit some sponsorship support for the event. And I think the other thing would be just encouraging each board member to, personally invite the elected city and school board members who are in our district to join us, both to learn more, to ask questions, and to find specific actions that they can take back to their jurisdictions. I'm not sure if that's clear to everyone, or if there's anything more to add, or if we need to make that a formal motion. But
So can you tell me, sorry, can you tell me what this number was that you said?
I said up to $15,000, which is I think what the coalition has provided thus far, and the Community Foundation is right in that range.
Okay, and then I want to go back to Mr. McKee and just say, is it appropriate for us to try to find that money today, or is this something that we should be bringing up at the April 5th meeting?
Right, or either at the April 5th meeting, or when Mr. Chulos brings back another agenda item in the future meeting, either time.
Okay, so is it possible that we would have the agenda item by April 5th?
Probably not.
Probably not.
But we might be able to give some indication on that at the budget meeting, at least get some direction at that budget meeting as far as where the source of funds is.
Okay, so yes.
If I may just add, I think that in terms of planning an event like this, it would be really helpful for the coalition to know what kind of budget they have to work with. And the longer we wait to indicate what amount of money we might be comfortable with, the harder it's going to be for them to make appropriate plans with that budget. So that's why I was suggesting that we maybe, if there's agreement or some sort of consensus about an amount, that we could indicate that today, take the action at a future date. But if we can provide some verbal guidance to everyone.
Just sort of a general, yeah. Okay, thank you for that. And then I think I saw Supervisor Lejo, and then Supervisor Lopez is done.
Yeah, I want to second and do provide that direction so that they know that we committed to $15,000, and we'll figure out where it comes from at a future meeting. And we do have time to figure that out, because as they said, they moved the summit to the summer. But I do like the hybrid version, because it's not only getting elected officials, but it's other partners. We should be reaching out to school districts. They also have staff that deal especially with homeless families and children. And so I think having the hybrid version lets people dial in from work and not have to travel, or just community residents, because this should be a larger conversation with our community, people who are concerned, people who want to be hopefully part of the solution, not part of the problem. So I think it's that kind of approach and vision that I think will elevate and help us progress more. And hopefully, it would help inspire people wanting to do this work, so that when we have the staffing challenges also, that we might get some more folks willing to step up and do this kind of work, because they see a bigger commitment coming from their communities and their elected leaders as well. So I like all these options, but I do want us to hopefully make this as impactful as we can, and inviting to as many people as possible utilizing our technology.
Thank you. So I believe Supervisor Rudetsky, was that a motion that you had on the floor to provide up to $15,000, and we'll find the money later?
I'll make it as a motion.
Okay,
Yes,
thank you, and I'll be happy to second that. Okay, so I'm so sorry, but I closed the community public comment at this point, and
Didn't even open
I
it.
would like to go ahead and take it up and have a roll call vote.
Supervisor Lego?
Aye.
Supervisor Phillips?
Do you have the chair answered the question. I'd been getting tests about whether there was going to be public comment at this point.
So if we, I'm so sorry, I thought we had completed public comment.
No, you asked questions of one speaker presenter.
Okay, thank you very much. I will be happy to postpone our vote and go back to public comment. And we have one person in the audience who would like to speak. Thank you for putting that forward.
So West Wide, Salinas, Monterey County Homeless Union, also a housing advisory committee for Monterey County. Just trying to, I guess, present some solutions. You know, the Coalition of Homeless Service Providers actually say they have a position paper against sweeps altogether. We could be using that sweep money toward just bags that are tossed over that can be collected outside of the encampment. And people will do that. They're actually doing that in a couple locations, because people just want that safety and security. And it's not really that hard. I think they've earned that validation. I don't want to put a label on them, but they're harmless. They're not homeless, they're harmless. And these folks have already tried to reach out. I mean, we have the city of Salinas, man. If you want to talk about a homeless outreach team and what they actually function, they tell people to go. You know what? It doesn't matter how little, how much, how clean, how dirty. You just got to go. Did you pay your rent money? Well, then you got to go. And I get paid to get rid of you. And, there's a lady that was in an RV, and she just parked there, and the assistant chief rolled up. Hey, you can't be here. There's a 72-hour notice. Where's the legality? And then there's a couple other RVs down the way. He did the same thing. And, you can't just, you see how actively we're working against people, and then saying after years later, oh, we finally paid you. Maybe you'll make the grade, but that's 5% of people, and 95% of people were abusing. We need to stop doing that. We need to stop driving people out and validate them, let them register to vote so they can vote for you or against you. But we need to stop sweeps.
Thank you, Mr. White. And now we have Karen Morgan. If you would like to press star 6, there we go. Thank you.
It's actually Stacey Alzheimer Perkins from Gathering Employment. I want to thank the Board of Supervisors for raising this issue and addressing this critical problem that we have in our community, as well as the coalition. I think the coalition is doing some work. I want to just suggest that the wonderful success of Project Comfy in Salinas be considered for the peninsula. I think it's something that we really need. And I also want to address the fact that the focus on funding has primarily been on permanent housing, and there needs to be more funding for emergency services as well. We can't just put people directly into permanent housing. It's just not that effective. So thank you all for allowing me to speak, and I appreciate all that you do.
Thank you, Ms. Morgan. And next we have Tyler Williamson.
Hey everybody, I'm Councilmember Tyler Williamson speaking as an individual here, but I just wanted to highlight Supervisor Adams. You had spoken earlier to exactly the point that I wanted to share, which was trying to find a space here for us to make sure that we're stopping the flow of people becoming homeless. And so we definitely are seeing people that tend to become homeless are renters, because they're unable to be in a position where they might be able to afford a home. And so how can we think about solutions that stop the flow of homelessness so that we can focus our ability on getting folks that are currently being unhoused out of that state. And then I also just wanted to give appreciation to Supervisor Alejo. You were speaking to a little bit earlier in regards to the need for political will and really just thinking bold and creative around these solutions. And I think that there's this really great potential with a lot of us electeds, and I imagine a lot more so as younger generations step up to the plate. So I think it's going to take us all putting our heads together, working together, maybe doing some things that we don't naturally feel comfortable with, to just feel creative and bold and energetic about going out there and taking care of the needs of the voices that are often muted. So thank you so much for having this conversation today.
Thank you, Mr. Williamson. And I really apologize to everybody as far as their public comments. Please forgive me that I did not follow through as I should have done. So why don't we just take it back out? Is there anybody else in the public that wishes to make comment now? And if you're trying to enter through Zoom and you don't have the number, I better make sure I give you that for a while. That number is 224-397-747. And you can either raise your hand by *9 to let me know you're out there. And when you do get acknowledged, if you would be able to just press *6 to unmute yourself. I'm not seeing anyone else. Yes, here we do. Eloise Shim, your hand is raised if you would like to press *6 to unmute yourself. There we go. Thank you.
Hello, this is Eloise Shim. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, just fine. Thank you.
Okay, so, well, I wanted to comment about the homeless issue. I don't think that Monterey County has really tackled this issue in a good way, because the systemic way of tackling it in Monterey County has not been very successful. And there is an article in the weekly, this last weekly, about, I think the title is Homeward Bound, and somebody who is the executive director of Gathering for Women says that, you know, this attitude of NIMBY, that we don't want people in our community who are homeless, goes on, and it's not compassionate, and it's really shameful when there are resources such as Home Key and other things. And Monterey, well, I guess in Salinas they've done some of that, but in the peninsula they really are blocking it. So it's for shame on them, for shame on you. Thank you.
Thank you for expressing your opinion, Ms. Shem. Is there anyone else in the public that would like to speak?
For shame on you.
Okay, I'm not seeing anyone else. Are you seeing anyone else with their hands raised?
Roxanne has her hand. Roxanne, online.
Roxanne, am I seeing that you're that you wish to speak, Roxanne?
Yes, just really quickly, I wanted to speak to what Stacy said earlier, because it is certainly worth mentioning. She's correct. A lot of the money a lot of the waves of funding that's coming down from the state is really focused on permanent housing. And specifically what we've done in our community is responded with permanent supportive housing, which is, just to be clear for those of you on the call who want to know, there is a major difference. Permanent supportive housing is for chronically homeless individuals. And the reason why there's been so many jurisdictions that's focused on that is because those are the folks who have been left outside for a really long time, and they can really benefit from having access to so many supportive services while they're living in their permanent housing program. But a lot of these other programs that are important to our community, transitional housing, emergency shelter, outreach, those emergency responses, there's not much funding out there for that. So it's just something for the board to be aware of. And we'll, like I said, we'll continue, the coalition and the leadership council will continue to try to identify funding streams to keep these folks going. But it is a concern, for sure. Thank you.
Thank you for expressing that thought. Okay, I'm seeing no more hands raised, and I believe I had already had a motion and a second. So we will now go to a roll call vote.
Supervisor Lego?
Aye.
Supervisor Phillips?
Aye.
Supervisor Lopez?
Aye.
Supervisor Askew?
Aye.
And Chair Supervisor Adams?
Aye.